Can't let you do that. Stop.
Comics are, and forever will be, a very hard thing to avoid if you're a fan of Star Wars, Marvel, or DC. Lucky for me, I'm a fan of all three, so I can enjoy and read these comics without having to choose sides. As a fan of comics, I've decided to spread my horizons and review, multiple things this time. With that said, 2 words, Boba Fett. If you know me in person, seen my channel banner, profile pictures, or thumbnails, you'd probably know very well that I'm a fan of Fett. So when you tell me they're making a comic about him, you can bet I'm walking into the local comic store to get 4 copies. If you want to click away as fast as possible and get away from my horrible channel, I liked it. That's it. You can leave now. But actually though, the comic was really decent. I had everything I wanted and even things I didn't know I wanted. There's no pandering scenes, everything just gets to the point, and I like that. Despite only being a little over 20 pages, I'm happy to say the thing does a lot right. There's creatures or droids you can see in the background that serve as a way to build the world. Most if not all the people here are aliens or random creatures that serve the same purpose. As a matter of fact, there's only very little human characters, believe it or not. Boba Fett, of course, is Boba Fett, and it's all great stuff, and you don't really know how to describe it when you first read it. You're kind of in a lost of words when you first read it, and you kind of have to read it a second time to really grasp in how cool this comic is. Something that I enjoyed very much was the fact that Boba Fett only has 2 lines of dialogue throughout the entire story, and they are very short, and that is exactly how you do a Boba Fett comic. Stories like Enemy of the Empire and Death Lies and Treachery, while great comics and feature Fett extensively, but in my opinion, he talks too much. Now, this in no way affects the comics as a whole, but it's a short detail that Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi establish. Boba Fett isn't prone to talking. Fett only talks when he really needs to exchange dialogue with someone, more specifically his bosses, like Vader for example. And in these stories, he talks a lot, even in places where he really doesn't need to. There's a short little moment in Enemy of the Empire that I'll use as an example. These officers are being attacked by a Wookiee, and Boba Fett saves them by killing the Wookiee itself. The officers thank him, and Fett just cuts them off to deliver a very edgy comeback that he did not need to say, and yet he did. Now, I'll admit, this is kind of a nitpick for these pretty old comics, but it's true nonetheless. Fett does constantly say things that he probably wouldn't say or isn't necessary for him to say. Now, Enemy of the Empire does a pretty good job of restraining Fett's dialogue by placing some of them in thought bubbles, which is a genius idea that Death Lies and Treachery didn't do so well. Now compare this back to Age of Rebellion, where Boba Fett does not say a single line to anyone except for the end of the story. Instead, he has people communicate his lines for him. And this is pretty fucking brilliant. Another thing I liked here was how they handled Boba Fett's role as a good guy and a bad guy. While you read the comic for the first time, you might assume, oh, maybe he's a good guy after all. But then you read it the second time and then you realize, oh, he totally left that one dude to die. This is a nice way to establish that Boba Fett doesn't do the things he does just to be a good guy or a bad guy, but rather, he's doing these to get paid. He's doing his job. That's what he does. And I like that a lot. Something that is short-lived but good was the action pages. There may be very little action, but when there is some, it's actually pretty good. The colors they use are very vibrant and bright, and everything is quick and to the point. It doesn't overstay its welcome, but it's not in a rush either. Another thing I liked a lot was his robot horse that Fett rides in the beginning of the comic. That horse alone deserves a solo movie, which is why I'm petitioning to make Horse That Boba Fett Rides in the Beginning of Age of Rebellion Boba Fett Issue 1 a Star Wars story a thing, please. The story isn't all good though. There are some bad things, but don't worry, it is a fairly short section. I didn't really have much problems with this comic, but if you count it not being long enough as a con, then be my guest, except for the problem all one-shots very badly suffer. Ads. This isn't a huge problem, but it is a problem. There's a few ads here that even last 2 pages, which is sort of a big problem, but isn't a huge one. Like, I understand why they must do these things, so I won't be taking off much from the rating, but it's still kind of an annoyance when I turn my page and I see a 2-page long ad. Another sort of minor problem is the very ending. Like I said before, Fett has 2 very small lines of dialogue in this comic, and most of them are at the very end. One of those lines is sort of cringy, and the ending itself, I feel like, has a weird pacing issue and isn't a huge problem. It doesn't interrupt the flow too much, but it's still there and kind of left me cringing a bit. Again, not a big problem. Alright, I'll just keep this short. It's really good. Up there with the better Boba Fett comics for sure. It has plenty of action, world building, and most importantly, Fett. And honestly, doesn't do much wrong. So, 4.5 out of 5. Pretty fucking good.